Let's give a round of applause and a welcome to Clayton Wood.
I'm so grateful you guys are here. This is the night also of Rhythm and Blooms Festival, and great bands playing. And if I wasn't here, I'd definitely want to check that out. So I'm very grateful that you guys have come out. It's obviously something that you care about, poverty. This is a focus on a Christian response to poverty. I'm going to say a little bit about our ministry. It's been around for almost 20 years. It used to be known as SOAR Youth Ministry. Some of you have been to Lonsdale and volunteered with us. Some of you used to come and don't come anymore, and we want you to come back. And some of you are with us regularly now. It's great to see you guys here. We are a Christian after school and mentoring program in the Lonsdale community. Lonsdale is one of the most impoverished communities in the city of Knoxville, northwest of downtown. There's a concentration of public housing there. There are 4 public housing developments within a 2-mile area. In terms of at risk, all the risk factors for children, families incarcerated, substance abuse, broken families, etc. It's one of the highest concentrations in our city. And so it's a place where we're seeing great progress because God's enabling us to bring His love to kids who are hurting. I'm going to start by saying what this is not. So this is not going to be a policy briefing. It's not going to be an exploration of global poverty. It's not going to be a complete explanation of racism and what we need to do about that next. It's also not going to be a theological treatise covering everything the Bible says about poverty and injustice. It's not going to be a song and dance number. I know, again, you guys already gave up the concert. If I was better, I'd do jazz hands and something else. Some TED Talks, you're like, that guy's incredible. Not me. We're going to talk about poverty in the United States and what a Christian can do to help the impoverished. This is a Krakauer quote that I like. The bottom line is, if you're listening and you're like, this is a way more complex topic than that, the answer is, I agree, but we're going to try to get through this in 20 to 25 minutes. How many of you know what the war on poverty is? We'll do hand raise. Couple? Few? Okay. The war on poverty is an idea that has been around for a little more than 50 years now. It's an idea that had tremendous money behind it and still does. The architect of the war on poverty, the guy who coined that phrase in a big policy speech, was the President of the United States at the time, Lyndon Johnson. And when he talked about the creation of the war on poverty, he said that the goal was not only to relieve the symptoms of poverty, but to cure it, and above all, to prevent it. He also claimed that the war would move people from being tax eaters to taxpayers. Guys, this is a newsflash. We're 50 years in, 51. The war on poverty failed. Okay, let's talk about that later. I've got a question. If you define the war on poverty differently than we did as Lyndon Johnson started it, you can say the war on poverty has had great success. We need to spend more, but it's certainly making a difference. The war on poverty has made a difference, but the war on poverty's stated goal at the beginning was to eliminate poverty. On that basis, it's completely failed. The United States today has more people who are receiving governmental assistance than at any time in our history, including when the war on poverty started. And many elements of our society, many of the most vulnerable elements of our society, are doing economically worse now than they were, again, when the war on poverty began. How much did the war cost? If we try to imagine $1 trillion, it's pretty hard to do. So, in inflation-adjusted terms, we spent over $22 trillion in the war on poverty. This is more than 3 times the amount we've spent from the Revolutionary War until now on every war combined. The war on poverty, this is a chart that you can somewhat see. It shows means-tested welfare spending. If you look and go, couldn't you get more accurate information? This is only to 2012. Many of these studies have a several-year time lapse before the new information comes out. So right now our current data is 2013. This is showing the spending and the absolute rate of poverty. War on poverty begins at the black line. Moving forward, you can see where the spending's going. From 2012 until now, that red line keeps ticking up, and the blue line is not correspondingly moving. This part of the war on poverty is the part that I'm the most passionate about. It's that the war on poverty has not had neutral impacts. If we could say $22 trillion have been spent and we haven't fixed what we wanted, but man, didn't we have great intentions? It wouldn't be something that really fired me up. It'd be like, well, we tried our best. But if we make the assumption that money given, money spent is neutral, we are not understanding the impact of money. We've created in our country a system, an incentive system. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a Democrat from New York, senator for decades, but when he was 37 years old, he was working in the Labor Department, and he said in 65, so a year after the war on poverty started, I'm worried. I think that the war on poverty is going to have negative impacts. I think that the negative impact I'm concerned about most is that we're going to create fatherless families in America. A community that allows a large number of young men to grow up in broken families dominated by women, never acquiring any stable relationship to male authority. That community asks for and gets chaos. That's Daniel Patrick Moynihan in 1965. This chart, 1964, all the way till 2008, is showing out-of-wedlock birth rate. The out-of-wedlock birth rate for every single group listed here is significantly higher today. That line continues to go up than at the end of this chart line in 2008. The out-of-wedlock birth rate that so concerned Moynihan in 65 was an out-of-wedlock birth rate of 25%. Today, every single group that is measured, including the groups that had the lowest rates, is over 25%. So what he saw as a warning that things could get really bad is the baseline. The incentives that we created within the war on poverty were that it was better, economically speaking, to not be married than to be married. It was better, economically speaking, to have children without a father or husband in the home than with. And as you can see from looking at the graph, the actual rates climbed tremendously and coincided almost precisely with this. Now, the only other thing this graph shows that's of interest, if you're a policy nerd like me, and we're almost done with the policy part, if you're not, is we see right where the black line is, and right before then, this dip in the fatherless out-of-wedlock birth rate. The dip coincides with the first times that it was being discussed as an inevitability that welfare was going to be reformed in America. If you're thinking I'm getting partisan, that actually happened under Bill Clinton, okay? Here we go. Poverty and obesity. This is the other second thing that we're going to look at as a unintended consequence. It is not helpful for anyone, but I also think it's just false to think that there's a grand conspiracy and people are like, let's get the poor. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Most of what's happened here in the last 50 years are things we can study. They're things we should be examining. They're things we should care about, but they weren't done out of evil intent. People didn't know what would happen. They thought they were helping, and in fact, they were hurting. Obesity is higher amongst the poor than it is amongst the middle class and the wealthy. That's often blamed on things called food deserts. Have you guys ever heard that term, food desert? So it'd be like there's no grocery store here. We're actually in one in Lonsdale, okay, a food desert. And we're really excited. Some of the folks who are here tonight are working on great things like community gardens to provide better access to kale and spinach, etc. But the main reason why people's obesity rates are so high there isn't because it's a food desert. It's because they're buying and eating the wrong things. In other words, kale is available at the store, even the stores that aren't the best stores. Kale doesn't taste nearly as good as Fritos chips. Put here a picture of corn, because I said we're paying for corn 3 times. Yeah, politically, this gets everyone, because literally both parties agree on this one. We're paying for corn when it's made, so we pay corn producers, including massive corporations. Then we pay for corn a second time when you go and buy Coca-Cola with corn syrup as a sweetener, or when you buy corn chips. I like them. I don't know about you guys. I think they taste really good. And then we pay for them a third time because of obesity-related illness and the fact that we're covering all of that. So we're paying for corn 3 times in our current system. If we're very concerned, and I think it makes sense to be, that we don't want our kids to become obese through foods that we're feeding them in our school system, I've heard a lot of people complain about that. I actually think that makes a whole lot of sense. It's our food that we're giving kids. why would we want to give them unhealthy things? It also applies, doesn't it, to all the food that we're paying for? It's great. I wish that we could have barbecues or our dinners. But over time, if you examine the spending, and guys, I'm talking anecdotally because I've been with folks getting groceries and trying to help them shop for better things. But also if you examine it in a massive scale, like a policy way of examining what's spent, the stuff being purchased for food by our tax dollars isn't good, not healthy. All right, mission to Mars. Anybody like space? Anybody excited about space? Okay, the Mars space program is not something that NASA's ready for yet, but I'm hoping in my lifetime they will be. I really want to go, okay? I am excited. My wife told me that once I lose my mind, she's promised to fill our living room with red sand and tell me that I made it. It's probably not happening for me, but I really, really want to head there. Our space program's been really successful, right? We got to the moon. If you don't believe in the moon, don't make that one of the questions. I'll start laughing too hard. We made it to the moon. We've made progress. We spent a lot of money there. We had a lot to show for it. What if I told you that you have a slot to go to Mars? It's going to be super exciting. I think you're probably worried about cramped berths, but we have this great design, science fiction looking thing that's going to make it so that your bed is comfortable. You've got space. You can actually have a window so you can look out and see the great scenery. Some of it will be dark. That's just space. But you're going to get to look at cool stuff as you're going. Also the food. I don't know if you heard about space food. Guys, I know we had a bad reputation, but we worked that out too. Not dehydrated things anymore. Now we've got really, really delicious food. And look, here, there's only a catch. I mean, it's a little catch. You're not going to be able to have any water or air on the journey because we just, that system, I don't know, the engineers can't work that problem out. How many of you guys want to go to Mars on that ship? Nobody. That won't work. Guys, I am saying when it comes to policy, the reason that this is a Christian response to poverty is because the government cannot ever eliminate poverty because poverty is much deeper than the physical manifestation that we too often focus on. Who best can impact poverty? We teach in our program, the kids, the adults we're helping equip to come alongside the kids, that poverty has a lot of areas. One of those areas is spiritual poverty, emotional is another, academic, and physical. Now guys, what of these four areas, what can the government do? How can the government help? The government is equipped to, the government can help with physical manifestations of poverty. The government can help, and I know there's arguments, but the government certainly can help in some of the areas of academic poverty. It can intervene there. It can make progress. What about emotional poverty? What does that even look like, emotional poverty? How do you handle disappointment? I mean, you learned that from probably your parents. It's probably where you learned how to deal with emotional stressors, how to deal with disappointment, how to bounce back. What if the only thing you ever saw was drink a bottle of vodka or use drugs or curl up in the fetal position and cry? Spiritual poverty, is ever going to be the government's role to fill that need, to fill that void? I think the answer is no. Now, what about the church? Guys, church efforts are fantastic. Cedar Springs, love it. Great efforts, great engagement. But what is the church in America? So not talking about this church, but just talking about the church in America. What do we spend most of our effort on in terms of poverty? Our focus is on what in these four areas? Physical. We spend almost all of our effort on that. Secondarily, and really we kind of only get to two, we go to academics. Hey, I bought you a backpack. I'll tutor you some. My brother is adopted from Ukraine, and after he became a Christian, he was so angry at the people who had come from America, from churches, who brought them bicycles and didn't tell them about Jesus. He said, I was going to go to hell when I died. And if I died last year, I would be in hell for eternity. And nobody told me. They brought us stuff, but I don't care about my stuff. I needed Jesus. The church is the answer that's supposed to be stepping in for spiritual nurture. Guys, physical poverty is often a manifestation of spiritual and emotional poverty, hopelessness, a lack of the ability to prepare for the future. The church has the answer in those things, but it involves relationships. It takes our time. It takes boldness to speak the truth in love and to step in. If you just think about physical poverty, do we have anything in American culture today that shows what happens when you give a lot of money to somebody who still has the same spiritual and emotional issues? It's called the lottery. Have you guys ever seen any studies about winners of the lottery? What does that look like? If you're in the underclass, if you're truly in, like what we just say, spiritual, emotional, academic poverty, somebody goes, here's $1 million. How are you doing a couple years later? Don't have any problems anymore. Used to live in a trailer, but I've got a nice 401k now, paid off my mortgage on this place, and have 3 successful businesses. Is that a typical story? It's usually a lot of heartache. It's usually a really sad story because the underlying causes of poverty that Lyndon Johnson talked about when he originally announced the war on poverty aren't addressed at all. That person just has stuff. 1 Timothy 5, God knows incentives. I know, Clayton knows, that's a terrible PowerPoint slide. I understand. Okay? That's way too much text, okay? So 1 Timothy 5, long passage here. Honor widows who are truly widows, but if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household, to make some return to their parents. This is pleasing in the sight of God. She who is truly a widow, left all alone, has set her hope on God and continues in supplications and prayers night and day. But she who is self-indulgent is dead even while she lives. Ooh, that one gets me, guys. Self-indulgent. Command these things as well so they may be without reproach. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Let a widow be enrolled if she is not less than 60 years of age, having been the wife of one husband and having a reputation for good works. If she has brought up children, has shown hospitality, has washed the feet of the saints, has cared for the afflicted, and has devoted herself to every good work. But refuse to enroll younger widows. For when their passions draw them away from Christ, they desire to marry, so incur condemnation for having abandoned their former faith. Besides that, they learn to be idlers, going about from house to house, and not only idlers, but also gossips and busybodies, saying what they should not. So I would have younger widows marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander, for some have already strayed after Satan. If any believing woman has relatives who are widows, let her care for them. Let the church not be burdened, so that it may care for those who are truly widows. Guys, societally, being a widow in this time is way worse than it is today. And yet, God understands incentives. If you take somebody who's not working and not doing anything, and you give them money because you feel bad that they're not doing anything, they're going to be deprived of the dignity of work. They're going to be deprived of a role that makes them feel like they're doing something with their life. And they're going to fall into these issues of being idlers, gossips, and busybodies, which, by the way, is not just a problem for poor people, okay? God understands incentives. Is this a passage that you hear taught a lot in the church about poverty? Not a common one. Mother Teresa, guys, if you already didn't like me, here we go. Buckle up. Mother Teresa, I see Jesus in every human being. I say to myself, this is hungry Jesus, I must feed him. This is sick Jesus. This one has leprosy or gangrene. I must wash him and tend to him. I serve because I love Jesus. So much good in the life of Mother Teresa, so much good in her example of service, so much good in the last sentence that she says, which is really, honestly, a great sentence for us to come back to at the end, because that's where I want us all to go. I serve because I love Jesus. The first sentence is terrible theologically. It's bad. It's wrong. Why does that matter? Well, most misused anti-poverty scripture in the Bible, okay? Tim Keller, one of my heroes, got this wrong, and now he got it right. He has 2 different books. The first one has the old way, and the new one has the new. The Olivet Judgment, Matthew 25, okay? I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty. You gave me something to drink. I was naked. You clothed me. Who is that talking about? You guys ever hear somebody talk about poverty and they're like, if you don't want to be a goat, you better be caring for the poor. This passage is a command to care for the poor. It's a command to care for poor Christians. It says, inasmuch as you've done this to the least of these, my brothers, adelphoi, the Greek word, you've done this unto me. It's the same words, the same phrases that are used when Saul gets knocked off his donkey and he says, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Why does this matter, guys? Because there's clear scriptural priorities for caring for the poor. The first thing is that we've got to take care of our own families. By the way, unfortunately in ministry, you guys think it happens sometimes that people care so much about helping others that they ignore their family or don't serve their family well? Happens. Not okay. Clear scriptural priorities. Take care of your family. Then take care of the family of God. Galatians 6:10, so then as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, especially to those who are in the household of faith. Including church discipline. Why would Jesus say the poor you'll always have with you? And in Acts, there's no poverty in the church. It's because there's a huge distinction made between inside and outside of the body. Church discipline, it's misapplied sometimes to non-Christian poor people. And that theologically is stupid. Okay? If someone, Romans 8, if we believe that they're a slave to sin and their problem is laziness, does it help them at all for us to say, quit being lazy? No. Until they're a Christian, they are a slave to sin. There's nothing that they're not going to be able to, well, I was going to be lazy, but this guy started yelling at me. I guess I'm going to work. That just doesn't happen. It's not helpful. 2 Thessalonians 3, 6 through 15, I'm not going to read the whole passage. I'll tell you, it's the passage that says, if a man won't work, he shouldn't eat, okay? Another passage a lot of people are not very familiar with in Scripture. In fact, I led an entire Bible study in Haiti after a group of 20 wonderful Christians on their multipleth trip to Haiti told me that that's not in the Bible. Because a guy who said, give me $5, when I said no, said, why? And he was standing next to a help wanted sign after the earthquake, and healthy young man, I told him, 2 Thessalonians. He looked at me like, what are you talking about? That guy was a guy who was walking around, oh, maybe I'll go to church, make the Christians give me something. Maybe that guy needed the gospel. Maybe he needed to go get work. But you know what he didn't need? He didn't need for me to make him understand that I'm an ATM machine who gives to people who demand of me money. The third thing is take care of everyone else God calls you to take care of. Now, what does that look like? Guys, I'm telling you that in order to serve as a Christian in the anti-poverty realm, you can't ask me, what's the book say here? Let me give you the facts. Give me an application. You've got to obey God. You've got to do what he tells you to do. Is giving money to somebody to buy crack a good idea? Hey, I'm really hard up. I need crack. Can you give me $20? Always wrong. Always a bad idea. Okay? It's an easy example I gave you. That's always bad. What about just giving somebody money? Is that always a bad idea? No. Was it always a good idea? No. What am I supposed to do? Whatever God tells you to do. But guys, don't judge non-Christians in the way that we can judge Christians. How can we know that we can have Christians who aren't living in poverty? Because church discipline tells us, this passage, 2 Thessalonians, what to do. Now, let's get political. Whoa, politics. First century church politics. Haha. Two responses to poverty, they're both bad, okay? They're both bad. A prideful Pharisee, a smug Sadducee. This picture of prideful Pharisee is a famous painting, the passage in Luke 18. Many of you guys know this passage well. The prideful Pharisee sitting there going, God, I'm so glad I'm not like this guy. Most people I know who do anything in poverty fall into one of these two camps. They're either like a prideful Pharisee or more like a smug Sadducee. Smug Sadducee. So unfortunately for this guy, I don't know anything about him other than he's a professor. It said that in his picture. And he's the number 2 image search on Google for smug Sadducee. So poor guy. I'm sorry, sir. I don't know you. I didn't think another picture of like first century garb would help either. So there you go. Satan's a judo expert. If you don't know judo, it's the martial art where like it uses your momentum to throw you to the other side. Guys, the truth is in the middle on a lot of these things. And when we get extreme on either end, we're going to be wrong, okay? Pharisees, a lot of these kind of phrases, poor people are lazy, God helps those who help themselves. Guys, where's that in the Bible? Second made-uppers? Yeah, it's not in the Bible, okay? I have no obligation to help the poor, and I can't help them anyway. The truth is that personal responsibility does matter, sin matters, and you need to get involved and love and help people. The other side, Sadducee, poor people are good and noble. They did nothing to cause their poverty. The poor are victims. I want to help this, but the system's too strong. Guys, John Mayer is a terrible theologian as well, okay? Waiting on the world to change. You guys know that song? Terrible idea. It's just wrong. I was going to do something, but it seems like the system's rigged, man. So, just sit here and just wait for a while, a couple more pumpkin spice lattes. When I'm 55, then we're going to help. Stupid. God hates injustice. That's a truth, okay? Why is it that when we talk about poverty, you have people saying personal responsibility is important, truth, and they're in the throats of the people who are going, God hates injustice, truth. Those are both true. Some people are poor because they've made lousy decisions. Some people are poor because they got oppressed by a broken system that God hates. Most people are somewhere in the middle. Both of those things are true at some level. We can't deny one side's truth because we don't like where the other person lines up. And that leads to the final thing. All of us need to walk in humility. 1 Peter 5:5, this is a picture of Christ washing the feet of the disciples. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Man, Joe and I do not agree on everything. But I love him. And I respect his wisdom. And I know that he's got a lot to offer me in terms of what I can learn to do to love people well. Don't join the parade. Guys, another topic we're not going to step on tonight is a landmine, is that many of you have feelings strongly about gay pride parades. Don't join the pride parade. Too often that would be me, if I'm honest with myself. And too often that would be people I disagree with on poverty issues as well. If at the end you're like, if only this person could read the right book. Listen, you must not have heard of this book. You're being condescending. And you're wrong. Don't be prideful in the way we interact with each other, okay? There is more to learn, but you have more to learn as well. And the way that we're supposed to serve people especially cannot be prideful. Can't be prideful. There is no one who is in spiritual poverty who's in a different state than what we all were in, apart from the grace of God. We were brought to new life in him. We were adopted into his family, not so that we could feel special and better about ourselves and ignore the suffering. We were brought from death to life so that we could reach out and love and serve those who are in need. Their needs are so much bigger than their crummy house or their messed up clothes. They need our time, they need our effort, and they need our love. I just came tonight from the funeral of a dear friend who lived that out. Miss Winky was a volunteer when I first came to Lonsdale. She was a woman who served in the military. She worked as a postal worker, and when she retired, she came to Lonsdale and served with the kids. And she told me at one point that for a long time she resented not being able to get married and have kids, but that when she looked back on her life, she knew that God did what he did in her life so that all the kids in Lonsdale whose hearts that she reached out could be her kids. She loved them well. She served them well. And we're called to do the same thing. Thanks so much for listening, for your attention.
All right, thank you, buddy. Good job. I think I have a future in this. One of the things that I want this to be tonight, if we can, is to not just be a talk and a discussion, but to spur us on to action where we do something with this. I don't know about you guys, but I'm sick of raising awareness and doing nothing more than that. let's raise awareness and figure out what we're going to do with this. And I think Summers and Kathy may be here tonight, and they've got some stuff after we talk that will help us get plugged in. There is no shortage of ways to get plugged in Knoxville for this kind of stuff. I'll go ahead and right now put my plug in for Thrive Lonsdale. If you guys haven't done that Thrive Lonsdale is a trip. That is the funnest place. We did a thing where we did barbecue this summer. My 30-second Thrive Lonsdale story. It's a bunch of great kids, and there's a good number of Guatemalan kids, so language can sometimes be a barrier. We come in, and I'm doing barbecue, and a little kid comes up to Clayton and says, "What are we having for dinner, Mr. Clayton?" And Clayton says, "Barbecue." And the kid says, "Barbecue what?" And Clayton says, "Barbecue pork." And the kid goes, "Oh, man." He just like rolls his eyes like so disappointed. And Clayton says, "Buddy, what were you hoping for?" And he says, "I don't want barbecue pork. I want barbecue sandwich." We're going to hook you up. You're going to be okay. Everything's going to work. But it's a great place. So that's a fantastic one, but there's tons more, too, in Knoxville to get plugged into. But the other thing is we want this to be a two-way deal. Yeah. Clayton is great at talking, but he wants to answer questions too. And as Steve said, I come at things from maybe a little different angle. And the population we serve downtown is a little different than Clayton's, and ours is mostly homeless folks. Different than more of the families that in Clayton's neighborhood in Lonsdale, but still very much a relevant thing there. So let's make this a two-way deal. And I know you guys have questions. This is one of those topics where there's elephants in the room that nobody wants to talk about. Do you give the guy money? Are you enabling people, or all this kind of stuff? So let's open it up for questions. If we don't have questions, Clayton brought his karaoke machine, and you guys don't want that. So let's have questions. Moldy?
I'm Chuck Norman. I work at Lonsdale Elementary and worked with Clayton as SOAR before. And I see the Thrive young ladies. I usher out the Thrive kids to them every day. And I just kind of want to make a comment and then get your all's reaction on it. I've come about 180 degrees from when I first was working in Lonsdale. And I'm a proponent of the book Toxic Charity at this point. And I love our kids. They're just precious, precious children. But it's messy. Working with people is messy. And just as an example of something that I've seen is, we have a backpack food program. About 2 years ago, it was 150 kids a week were getting served. And I'm sorry for taking so much time, but then our community resource coordinator put in a new idea to create some accountability. They were given a bag, like a shopping bag, to get food. For the next week, they had to bring the food back, or bring the bag back. We're down to about 15 kids now. And we've heard complaints from people in the neighborhood where the children look in the bags. They throw out carrots. They'll throw out this, that. So it's messy. It's difficult. So if you all would, that's just a comment on what you think about that situation and how best to serve. Thank you.
So it's relational. That's I think the answer is that you can't give what you don't have. If you have never had a good recipe for carrots, or if your parents didn't ever make you eat them. At one point, my brother was working for me as a teacher, and he instituted a rule that our mom gave us. I don't know how you guys feel about your mom. For us, like, that's, God said stuff, and that's like inerrant, but mom was like pretty close. It's almost certainly right. And that is, he told the kids, look, you don't get dessert if you don't eat your vegetables. Well, then kids said, I'm allergic to whatever. And he said, okay, listen, if you get a letter from your parents saying that you're allergic to something, then you can have dessert without eating that, whatever that is. We got letters from most of the parents in his class saying that their kids were allergic to vegetables. okay? Not carrots, vegetables category. And it wasn't like written in crayon and I was like, oh, come on, buddy, I know you made that. This is I would call their parents on the phone and say, hey, just what was this? Oh, yeah, he has a problem with vegetables. Okay. What does that look like? It looks like a whole couple generations of people who didn't eat vegetables and nobody made them. And nobody told them why they needed it. And nobody explained nutrition, obesity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't give what you don't have. It's relational. You got to love somebody enough to go, man, I'm going to sit here and talk about vegetables for a while.
Yeah, and I would say our side of that, we see there's a lot of it that is you can only do your part. And sometimes, I mean, you don't want to be foolish and reckless about what you're helping with, but sometimes that's if they throw the carrots out, there's not a lot you can do about that. And you've done your part in providing. At some point it is on them. If they waste the carrots, or I had someone tell me the other day that it goes back to me on it. It's not about me. It's you do your part, hand that over, and then from then it's on them what happens to it. But it is frustrating. I hear you on that for sure. If we could make Moldy run as much as possible.
Don't ask your question over there until he's made it.
Thank you, Moldy. On one of the slides I saw, you had the single parent family growth chart, war on poverty, then the Reform Act. If anybody knows anything about that Reform Act, basically, I got into an argument with a friend once and said, hey, it really didn't do what it set out to do. And stick with me here because it does come full circle. Basically, I said, it didn't do anything. Look at the amount of money that was spent on it. The year before the Reform Act, it was like $15 billion or something like that. And they said, well, we cut that in half that year with the Reform Act. And I said, how much did they spend on it the next year? $15.2 billion the next year. So they cut the amount of people on the welfare, in the United States in half, yet the tab went up. So it didn't do anything for the U.S. taxpayers or anything like that. And so, to this day, I still don't know what their rationale was with that. But what I think my question is what do you think politically? Because, it does come back to that. What do you think politically the church can do, short of just going, oh, that guy's a Republican, I'm going to vote for him, to fix this?
Let me get my policy glasses and fix them real quick, because I love your question. I'm excited to talk about policy. We have data points. This is 50 years, okay? Social science is not art. It's supposed to be science. There's something you get to look at, right, and say, what is this doing? We have 50 years of data. At a state level, there is a lot better data in terms of different approaches to reform. The state is the laboratory of democracy and ideas. Some of them are great, some of them are terrible. By the way, depending on your stripe, there's a lot of laboratories to choose from, right? Oregon's doing real different things from Iowa right now. So, welfare reform in 1996 had some impact. Welfare reform was mostly modeled on welfare reform in Wisconsin. Policy glasses, I told you, I'm a bit of a nerd. Sorry, guys, just a second. In Wisconsin, what you had is a ton of people who got jobs, who never had jobs before. And guys, ultimately, look, people are sometimes evil and cruel when they portray who's on welfare and what they look like. And honestly, one of the reasons that that's an issue that Republicans have gotten creamed on sometimes is because they look like they hate poor people when they talk about it. That's terrible. What's the answer for the church? Love people. Love poor people. And if you're a person who cares so much about poor people that you feel like the incentives haven't been placed in a healthy way, make sure that everybody understands that your love for the poor is what's motivating you to care about policy. Does that make sense? Ultimately, when helping hurts, toxic charity, those are great things. God gives us dignity and value in our work. We enjoy working. When you get to know people, and Joe and I, are definitely coming from somewhat different perspectives. But look, with Joe's population, my solution is not give everyone a shovel and tell them to start digging holes. There's a ton of people who can't work, right? I mean, they really can't. There's a reason that they can't. There's lots of reasons in some cases that they can't. If you're a disabled person, I'm not saying get a job, sucker. All of our motive needs to be love. And the church can help people. Again, when it gets to politics, the part where I diverge and people are like, what are you talking about, slavery to sin? That's awkward. Why are you bringing that up? It's because I don't think it works very well to say go get a job when somebody is a slave to sin. They need a whole lot of help spiritually, right? For lasting prosperity, not the prosperity gospel. I'd love your thought on this. I'm going to give the next question and you're going to talk about it. How about the fact that most people around the world who love Jesus are incredibly poor? Most people around the world who love Jesus are incredibly poor. And I think traveling around the world, for a lot of them, that's a feature, not a bug. I mean, they're doing very well because they're not distracted by all their stuff. They're doing very well because when they pray, give us this day our daily bread, they see God providing it in a way that we can't really in America. Any discussion of the war on poverty that doesn't admit that the poor in America are doing really well compared to the global poor is not a discussion worth having. That's an obvious truth. There aren't people starving to death in America. There aren't, and by the way, the Bible, I was naked, you clothed me, I was hungry. Guys, that's so many of our brothers and sisters around the world. So we're not going to go too far down that, but what do you think about the benefits spiritually, emotionally, to people being in some level of physical poverty that God wants them to be in for his glory?
Yeah, that is, I mean, you see that. You see that in worship services in your part of town are very different than they are here. Even in, I mean, some of y'all know, I mean, I worked for 25 years in Sweetwater, and even in not just, you know, urban, but rural is the same way. I mean, you look at the old hymns, and there's a whole lot of the old hymn songs that are I'll Fly Away and Better Yonder Over There, and they're looking to something better, probably because their life right now isn't all that great. So absolutely, there is it's weird to say it, but there can be an advantage spiritually for that connection for someone that doesn't have, and again, it sounds weird, but the curse of all this wealth that kind of blinds you over. I mean, I say that I think the hardest people to witness to in all of Knoxville are people right here in this neighborhood. I mean, they don't go, I mean, I was that same guy 25 years ago that I thought I didn't see, my need wasn't as obvious when you have the physical, you know, advantages and the you know, the wealth that can come with that. So I mean, you're basically glossed over. You're just as broken, but it's easier to cover that up when you're not sleeping outside.
Absolutely.
And too, as much as Clayton is a nerd on policy, I'm the opposite of that. I'm probably too far on the don't know, don't care, in that I just feel like my job is what Clayton just said, love. Just love that guy. And it could be, I mean, I honestly can't tell you very much at all about policy on that. And to me, that's just something that's not relevant to what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the same things we do, policy or not. I mean, that really doesn't affect how we do it. And Clayton's the same way. I think he likes it because it's a hobby and he can do that, but he does the same thing too. He'll run Thrive Lonsdale the way he does it, regardless of policy, because he loves those kids. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I know you're opposed to handouts and everything, and I agree. I'm just kind of curious, what is your response? Like, how do you respond to somebody who reaches out to you for money?
So, well, that's a great question, and I told Joe a funny story about that. So, it's funny because he knows how awkward I am. I was in a bathroom. Okay, I'm not in Tennessee. I'm not in my state. Okay. My wife knows that I'm
gas station bathroom.
Yeah, my wife knows that I'm weird in general, because if I was in Knoxville bathroom, I'd be like, maybe this guy's gonna come to church. Like I'm in a bathroom in another state, and I feel like God tells me while I'm using the facility that I am supposed to give a guy who's mopping the floor $20. I felt like it was pretty clear, and I was not happy about it. And I said, Lord, you know, That was so weird. It almost seemed like you wanted me to give that guy $20. And it kept, you got to give that guy 20. Oh, he's going to be so rude. Like he's doing his mopping and he's going to think why? No. I wash my hands as slowly as possible, remove the skin on the back of my hand. And I go and get a hand towel and I'm drying my hands. He's still there. I was like, dude, you're killing me. Finish up. And I walked over to him, and I did not share the gospel, and then he like got down on his knees and said, please, bless me. I've been praying for this. I said, hey, I think God wants me to give you this. I handed him $20, and I said, I hope you know that God loves you. I hope you have a great day. And I left. I have absolutely no idea what that was. I really don't. I don't know why I was supposed to do that, and I'll never know until I get to heaven, and maybe not then. I think there'll be a lot more things I'll remember to ask about before then. But eternity's a long time. I'll get around to it. Anyway, I don't know what that was about. The answer is obey what God tells you to do. That again, you have to obey what God tells you to do. And man, I've had to check my heart on terms of relationally serving people. In Lonsdale, when I meet a little old lady who turns out to be my dear sister in Christ, and in order to get there, I had to listen to stories about her cat. I don't like cats, okay? I really don't care about yours, okay? I wouldn't even want one myself. And then it's like, well, she's a Christian. Why would I? And he was just like, I want you to encourage her. You worked for me. This whole time was for you to encourage your sister in Christ. Suck it up. You listen to a cat story. I mean,
Yeah, and no cat story here. Most everybody in that industry or whatever that is familiar with the homeless, especially homeless, and even the poor folk will say it's not a good idea to hand them money. The difference for me is if you know them.
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, that's kind of weird. How do you know them? And I said, well, that's kind of the point. Maybe you get into a relationship, and I say relationship. I don't know them, but I know their name, know what they looked like last time I saw them. And know if they're maybe sober today, but couldn't stand up, last week, that kind of thing. And it's usually a bad idea if you don't know them. But there's been times too, and Clayton is right. And that's a odd thing, kind of a hard thing when it's follow your heart, follow the Holy Spirit, follow what you're being led to do. But I will often give folks a little money when I know them. And I mean, I did. Last month, I gave Stephen and Octavia. They had this beat up car that was barely running. They needed a little gas money, and you give them money, and then last time I saw them, I was like, hey, here's that $8 you loaned me, and they gave it back to me. So it's like, sometimes that happens. Now, if it's a guy on the street at the exit that I don't know, usually not. For those folks, an easy thing to do on that is have bottled water in your car. If it's winter, go to the dollar store and buy some knit caps or gloves or something, and just have a couple of them in the sitting in your glove box. It's just a real easy way to do that. And most of those folks are thrilled to get that. And yet there are professional guys that do that. You hear, I think that's way overblown. I think myth that people talk about to make themselves feel better about not giving them money. But every once in a while, you get a guy that says doesn't want the mittens or whatever. Well, that guy wasn't your guy anyway. But but the whole thing is, I mean, Steve and I were talking about it. He made, and I didn't even really think about it. But I said, yeah, give them to him if I know him. And Steve brought that to me. Well, maybe that is the point. Maybe the point is to get to know him same way
Absolutely.
you do.
People don't care what you know until they know that you care. I have not. I mean, sometimes my wife's like, why were you in there for so long? And I'm like, oh, I was trying to share the Christ. It's not usually the most successful time. I mean, if the Lord tells me to do it, I'm going to do it. But it's not like, hi, I'm Clayton. Nice to meet you. Do you know what's going to happen when you die? That's just not the way it works. But if a homeless guy or gal is sitting there, and I'm seeing my sweet Lonsdale ladies in the front row here, and I'm feeling like a dad of a daughter, don't pick up a homeless guy, girls, by yourself. Unless God really yells at you to do it. Take them to eat. Oh, I'm hungry. Great. Would you like to go get lunch? Would you like to go get dinner? when you get to know people's story over time, like how'd you end up here? Well, you'll start to see patterns, certainly. But you also have times to say, hey, I want to tell you a little bit about my story. Man, I deserved hell. I was lost. I had no hope. And I want to tell you about Jesus. And once you've listened to them for a while and they know that you care about them, they're ready to hear that.
Yeah, 1,000%. If there's something that I've learned over the years with it, is that they're a lot more hungry for what you would call emotional nourishment than they are physical nourishment. I mean, we think that barbecue is a big deal. It's not a big deal. Nobody in Knoxville, unless there's something socially, mentally off with them, should be hungry. There's all kinds of food available in Knoxville. The food is really secondary. I think that the big thing about the food for us is that they know that somebody cared enough to bring it to them. That's their big thing. I mean, they literally, I think, are glad to see us, not because they're not going to be hungry anymore. They weren't hungry when they got there. It's that somebody's going to be there and give them a hug. And just, that sounds corny and cheesy, I know, and I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it for 5 years running. But there are people that just they're much more interested in that, hey, I'm glad to see you. Remember their name. Give them a hug, ask them how their cat's doing. But that's a real thing. And it's just a real thing. It's acting, excuse the language, but Steve and I talk about, it's acting like you give a damn. That goes a lot further with those folks than I think any food does. And certainly any more than money does.
So sometimes this topic can be kind of like overwhelming and discouraging. Can you guys think of an example of a time when or a story when you felt like, wow, this is really working, or this is really worthwhile?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And I want you guys to feel encouraged in one sense. Feel encouraged that you are here and you care enough to come to this. That's something. That's a big step. Feel encouraged because you realize something's stirring in you that it matters. But also, what does it look like relationally? Guys, I can report, and hey, I'm the executive director of Thrive Lonsdale. We have a website. We need money, But I can report this semester has been remarkable, and we're in a place that I did not think we'd get to for a few more years. And that's this. The main data point that I have as an executive to keep pouring over is our kids' behavior. We have a lot of rules, as one kid told me as he was getting kicked out. You guys have a lot of rules here. They're not overwhelming. Kids can actually memorize all of them because there's not that many. But we have a lot more rules than some other programs. Our kids are just behaving themselves now. Wow. I mean, for the first time this semester, we have our kid meetings and we'll say, who's in trouble? Like, who's about to get kicked out? Who do I need to really intervene with? Who needs more counseling? Who needs more support? Who needs more help? Nobody. Nobody's about to get kicked out. Well, I think you already kicked out the bad kids. That's part of it. Okay, I did. But also, these are not all kids who've gotten saved. These are kids who've seen consistent loving discipline that they never got at home, and they've seen it now for a few years. And they're going, man, every single time I do that, I'm banging my head against the wall. Every time I do that, there's a negative consequence for me. And every time I do this, there's positive stuff. I get to go to the store and spend my points. And I think I'm going to do this over here. And so walking with people, I mean, Joe and I were talking about how in mentoring, there's a I guess like, I'm about to give an example from when people run marathons, and I could never run a marathon without dying of a heart attack. Halfway through marathons, people say you push through this really hard time. It is like that with mentoring. You will get to know a kid, you'll start to love them, you'll be like, man, I'm really making progress. And the kid will act like a jerk to you. They'll push you away because they will be scared to death that you're going to leave them. And they want to make sure that you really do care about them. And when you push through that and get to the other side, it makes a tremendous difference. It makes a tremendous difference in their lives. There are 2 boys right now who are being mentored by a guy at Cedar Springs who heard me speak at a missions conference, felt kind of guilted into it, and was like, I don't really want to do this, but I'm here. And as he did it, he kept saying, Clayton, this is really awkward. I don't like this. He's been coming now for a couple years. And the kids who he's with are awesome. they're doing great. The first kid I gave him as an angel. I mean, I was like, it's awkward for you, but this is going to work great. The second kid asked him to please be his mentor because he saw the other kid going. And when he came and said, is this okay for me to take him too? I said, man, let's pray about that. And he took him. And hey, by the way, full circle, unplanned, they love his cats. The two boys go out and stay at his house, and they're big fans of his cats. So.
It's coming back to you.
Cat stories.
If I understand your question too, it can feel overwhelming. It's an unbelievable problem, and it can be crushing sometimes. I mean, once about every other month, I'll wind up back. I'll start crying over something. It just hit. I mean, it was a special needs kid with 2 homeless parents last time, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I mean, it's like, I don't know what to do. I mean, barbecue. What kind of help is barbecue for that guy? And it's unbelievable sometimes the toughness of it. The other side of it, I will go back and it's like, okay, what are my options? My options is do nothing and just totally leave it alone and let them figure it out, or I can do what I can. And it's like Clayton said, you guys are here. I mean, I love that phrase of just do the next right thing. It doesn't have, so many times I see these people that have a grand, gigantic idea, and it may be a great idea, but it's so huge that it likely will never get off the ground, and instead of doing that big thing, they wind up doing nothing. So I tell folks, just do the next right thing. Do the little thing you can do. And we have tons of wins, I call them. I mean, we have got friends down there. We've got people that I've seen marriages get restored. I've seen kids born. I mean, we saw this lady, and she was, on crack and gets pregnant. And you think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? She gets off crack. The baby's born, healthy little 2-year-old, cutest kid you ever see running around now. So good things happen, but the thing is, when it feels overwhelming, what Clayton said, just keep plugging through. I mean, the example I've used on that, it's like, showering doesn't last either, but it doesn't mean I'm going to stop. And it's like you just keep on. I mean, yeah, it's not for permanent, but so what? Just keep chugging with it, but you'll get discouraged. It's messy, it's ugly, it's painful sometimes. But you just keep chugging through it. Because it's like, I would go what I said, what are your options? Your options is quit and ignore it totally. Well, that doesn't work either.
Yeah. One of the verses in that passage I didn't read is don't grow weary in doing good. We need to hear that. Don't grow weary in doing good.
And that too, I encourage other people when you see things doing that. You don't know. I mean, there could be somebody that's just about worn out and is thinking, I'm tired of sticking my finger in the dike, hole, plug in the hole that doesn't work, and it's just all for naught. You see people doing hard stuff like that. Encourage them. That can go a long way sometimes.
Yeah, so my question is, well, I don't know how to phrase the question, but so very, very short background. I've worked or volunteered rather at SOAR and Thrive, and it was really hard. It required a lot of time. Volunteered in the 8th grade classroom there, and I almost quit. I don't know if I ever told you that, Clayton, or not, but
I'm glad you didn't.
But so the point is that first semester, that fall, it was really hard. The kids gave me a hard time, didn't have any respect. But after Christmas break, I came back. I was like, oh, I'm not quitting. And what I found was a switch got turned when I came back. And all of a sudden, I was at least bearable to be around them. And they started kind of warming up. And so it took a long time to get that. And then since that school year, I've been working with a young man, and finally learned, gotten to know his family and kind of doing some good things with them. So my question is, and I'm fully prepared for kind of a tough response, is how do you keep that up for so long? With myself, I kept it up for a while, and I'm still doing it to some degree. Life happens, children, other things. What do you say to people who are passionate about poverty or some other good cause like that? who say, man, I want to help, but dang, I'm so busy. I got this going on. I don't know what I can do. And it probably takes a lot of work to actually make a difference. What do you say to someone like that?
That's a great question. So the attributes of love in 1 Corinthians 13, the description, love is patient. That's where we start. Love is patient. You got to be patient. And also, another scripture comes to mind, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's the reason I would say, not a specific church, the church, our failure in responding to poverty is that we don't want to give our lives. I'm really glad you didn't quit. Joe's up here and gives his time, a lot of time, every month. But man, I'll tell you, if I go and speak at a group and it's half women and half men, the response rate from the men is, 10% of the response rate from women in terms of caring for poor people, in terms of stepping into their lives. Guys, what do you think in the inner city? Do we need a lot of godly women to show up? Yeah, we do, sure. Not turning away anybody. No, but we do need that. But what's the void? What do I show on the slide? There's not godly men. They're not in their lives. They're not involved. They don't have a dad. They don't know their dad. Why don't we do it? The pastor from Kenya who was here, if you guys were at the missions conference, he was hilarious riffing on golf, and I don't want any of my donors to stop writing checks, so I won't. Don't quit playing golf entirely, but goodness, if you can play 4 rounds in a week, you could go to 3 and give that time from one of those times to come and mentor a kid. Or help. There's so many places to help. Guys, what are we talking about with the next right step? Start with a small commitment. I don't know, can any of you relate to having really good ideas about getting in shape and then not? Okay. It's always to me like, I got to go for an hour to the gym and I'm going to do my cardio and then I'm going to do this. And my cousin who's a bodybuilder, personal trainer, like, what workouts do you do? Oh, I think I tore my tricep. Do something little. Why wouldn't you start for 8 minutes and be like, I'm out of breath now, I'm stopping, okay? Do the same thing with volunteering and relationships and helping the impoverished. Do something little, and over time, why do you come back now? Because you love him. Because that's an organic relationship, because you care about him. Well, will you always see him at the same time? No. Do we always see our friends at the same time? No. When you love someone, when God brings them into your life relationally like that, and you're helping them, he brings them into your heart, and you respond because you're thinking about him. You text him because you want to know what happened with his day. You're there for him to call when he has a problem because you gave him your number and said, I love you, and if you have a problem, call me.
Yeah, I think that comes exactly what you're saying too, Clayton, and just listening to your heart, listening to the Spirit within you, talking about how the Holy Spirit's guiding you. It's working with homeless folks, working with inner city kids is not for everybody. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If that's not speaking to you, I don't think there's any shame in that. Mike and I had a conversation today. He said a friend of his he knew decided a girl wasn't going on a mission trip because she felt God told her it wasn't the right time for her to go, and that's a good answer. Mm-hmm. That there's nothing wrong with that answer at all. So you'll know. And that's one of those weird kind of cop-out sounding answers maybe, but you'll know when you're doing the right thing. And I believe there are times to take a break too. We haven't hit that with our thing, but if we do, I don't think there'd be any shame in that. So you'll know. But then there also you have to weigh out, is this really God, or is this me being, just being a little bit lazy and not wanting to do it too? So you have to balance that out, and that's a hard tension sometimes. That was way too close to Moldy right there.
Do you think it's because, what he said, also because our expectation is too high, that we set ourselves like, hey, this kid in 6 months, I want to see him here, but sometimes it takes longer than 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think that we have unrealistic expectations. Here's just a really easy example. I work with kids. One of the sweetest sessions I've ever been to on mentoring said one of the dumbest things I've ever heard someone teach about mentoring, and that is you don't want to try to change someone. What they meant is you don't want to be a condescending jerk who shows up and goes, here's your plan, we're going to get you on a track. And you're not their life coach, right? You don't even know them. You got to love them relationally before you can do anything. But what if I said, like, man, I have spent like an hour a week with my daughter for like, I don't know, 10 years, and she's kind of terrible. Was I a godly parent? I mean, no, that's not even close to enough time, right? So we need to be patient. We need to have realistic expectations. We need to know what we can do. But movie Up, have you guys seen that movie Up? Okay, the end of that movie, I'm an Eagle Scout, love scouting. It was great for me. I know I did brag, though. It's true. But scouts meant a lot to me. My scoutmaster's still a guy I know. I talked to him on Facebook this week. But you know what? He wasn't that important to me in my life as a male role model because I had an awesome dad who was godly and incredible. At the end of that movie, there's a kid in the movie who doesn't have a dad in his life anymore. And there's a guy who shows up for him at his ceremony. And John Sowers wrote great books about growing up as a fatherless guy. Just every time he tells a story about that movie, cries. Because he said, that was me. And guys, for so many people, homeless people, inner city kids, handicapped kids, you're one of the only people who's coming by. You're one of the only people checking on them. And so I'm only giving an hour a week. That could be a precious time that if you're not there, they're not seeing anybody who loves them and who's checking on them. So have realistic expectations in terms of what will happen in their life, but don't underestimate the need and what a difference you make with a little time.
And that's kind of what I meant on the carrot thing. Don't feel it's not really on you to get results always. I mean, you may be just, I liken it to farming. You're just farming. You're plowing the ground. You're doing that hard work, and you may not even see any fruit yourself with that person. That may be for the person 5 people down from you. Mm-hmm. So it's not about, again, it's not about the results you can get. You just do the right thing. You know what's right, and that if you're not seeing results and it takes a long time or that kid's a hard case or something, you're doing your part. You're kind of like that farmer casting seed out, and it's not really up to you how that kid responds always. Just you do the right thing, and I believe that, I mean, that's all you can do, and then good things happen. So you don't always see the fruit. You may always see the next guy walks up and gets instant fruit without hardly doing any work. Well, good. I mean, that, we're not keeping score.
Yeah.
God wins in the end.
Trying to phrase this question or statement. We talk a lot about, so far what I heard is, what we can do. I think the more I think about it, about a Christian response, I think of inwardly, what myself. So in that, I was thinking, am I position myself to be able to be used by God through loving those people? Mm-hmm. Or am I position myself to be able to sit down as a learner and listen? Like what you say, like when you listen, you understand where they're coming from, so you be able to connect with them in that part and where Jesus meets them. And at the same time, like, am I position myself financially to be able to give freely? I think that's one thing in the past for me is just worry about, okay, do I have money to even give? And that's my responsibility or irresponsibility. Sometimes we don't even have money because we are so irresponsible to take someone out to eat. Or invite them to be a part, or even scare, hey, I'll take them to eat, but don't buy anything above $5. The dollar menu is
that's fine. The dollar menu works for the kids. That's good.
So, but just in general, it's just like I need to ask myself, am I positioned myself to be used by Him in the areas in my life as well?
That's great. That brings us to prayer, which is huge. Huge. You've got to be prayerful. Guys, is prayer like telling God stuff, or is it listening to Him? Well, I think it's obvious, right? It's listening. And often, I think we can get in a totally wrong place spiritually when we, the verse, be anxious for nothing and everything through prayer and supplication, make your requests made known to God. I left something out of that verse. But I think a lot of us edit that verse that way. It's be anxious for nothing through everything in prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Okay? If we think about somebody, a kid, a homeless guy, whoever, just relationally, the poor, and we don't thank God for them, our attitude towards them is going to be wrong. They're not somebody who's in your life as a project that, look at me, aren't I awesome? I'm helping them. I'm so thankful for this chance to be like Christ. I'm so thankful for this chance to humble myself. I'm so thankful for this chance to serve. Our thankfulness for that person will enable us to have a Christ-centered relationship, a gospel-centered relationship that's not condescending at all, that's not based on guilt, but that's truly based on the love of God.
Can we, I'm going to ask the last question because it's something we've talked about, and it's kind of related to what you're talking about. How do we, that's part of the inward thing, and part of the struggle I think that probably a lot of us feel is, okay, can I drive the car that I do and live in the house that I live in the neighborhood? Can I do that? Can I have stuff and still care about the poor? Or is that hypocritical? Let's make that be the last thing, and then Summers is going to come up and close us up. But y'all
Great.
respond.
You will go first, John.
Yeah, guilt is never a good reason. I mean, to me, I think you totally flip that thing on its head, Moldy. And the way Andy Holtz, a lot of y'all know Andy, and Andy gave me really good advice one time and about stuff, material things, a house, a car, whatever. And his words on it, paraphrasing, were basically boiled down to, it's okay to have that. Think about how you think about it, and the easiest way to think about it to me is like, how would you feel if that was taken away? And you think you have a cool car, and that's nice, and I have a nice truck, and I like it, all right, but if I had to drive a old beat up truck, it wouldn't be that big a deal. If my response was that my world comes apart because now I don't have a new truck anymore, that's a different thing. That's a different way of looking at that truck, and where it can almost become an idol. So you see that with houses. You see it with, Barbie and I had a thing that we bought a new house, and it's got this little barn thing on it, and someone was asking me, said, "Is that like a dream come true for you?" And I was like, "Not really." I mean, I like my house, and I think I like it, but it doesn't like complete me or something. But so many people do see it that way. They are their house, they are their car, they are their job or whatever. So I think to me, Steve, that's the way I see it, and it's worked pretty well for me in the past of looking at something as if how you would feel about it when it's taken away, and if you're not getting too attached to it, that's probably a healthy way of seeing it.
I agree with that. I think that you're only responsible for stewardship of yourself. Okay, and guys, I got really fat one time when I was up in New York. I was doing a case up there, and I called my cousin David. Some of you guys know David Wood, and he's like, make a food diary. I don't know. I didn't know what a food diary was. He's like, write down everything you eat every day. Start doing it. Because I probably was eating 8 to 25 rolls a day. I was stressed, and rolls are free at the restaurant. And I mean, hey, yeah, let's keep working on the case. I wasn't aware of what I was doing, okay? Your stewardship that you're responsible for is what God's given you, okay? That's your time, talent, and treasure. Some of you have a lot of money. Great. You're responsible for stewarding that. Do what God tells you to do. I think what most of us fall down on is our time. Our time is the hardest thing for us to give away. But if you do an audit, food journal, do a time journal, okay? I mean, I love Seinfeld, but how many hours of it do you need for this week, okay? If you do it, if you sit down and go, oh man, I thought I was busy. Pub Talks, I love everyone who's here, whatever age you are. But Pub Talks is designed for folks who, guess what, guys? You may not believe me, but you have more time right now than you're ever going to have the rest of your life until you retire. And by the way, if you're here and you're retired, come down to Lonsdale and help us. But if you're like, oh gosh, I'm so busy, you don't understand. Ask yourself what you're prioritizing and what God's led you to do and what you're doing for fun. It is not wrong to have fun. I really think a Christian can only play Xbox for 30 minutes, and when the timer dings, it's sin. Pray about it. Do what God tells you to do. Have you guys seen Schindler's List? At the end of that movie, he's sitting there with different things, and he's looking at them, and he's like, this could have saved more people. It's a great movie about a true story where a guy saved Jews from concentration camps by purchasing their freedom from corrupt Nazis. And he breaks down at the end because even though he's given so much of himself, there's more people he feels like he could have saved if he'd given up more possessions. I don't think any of us are going to be on our deathbed going, I think I was like a lieutenant general in I can't even say that. What's the game? The Command and Conquer. I'm so old now. The good Xbox where you're shooting things. Okay, Call of Duty. This guy's cooler than me. You can tell by his clothes, but he knows that stuff too. Call of Duty. I don't think any of us on our deathbed are going to go, I never made general, lieutenant general. I was at 10,084, and if I had cracked top 10,000, I really think God would have been more pleased. I just ask yourself at the end of your life, what are you gonna wish you had done more of, and what are you gonna wish you had done less of? All of us, I think, can answer that question by saying we want to serve God. We want to meet needs. And there are tons of opportunities. Summers is going to come up now and talk about opportunities. Guys, I'm telling you, it's not, come down to our place. Please do, but look, I'm friends with people running awesome ministries that aren't us. In other places, they're doing other things. And God does not call us all to do the same thing. We're called to do lots of different things. And you just need to pray and find out where God's calling you to serve. But I can guarantee you, there's a lot of spiritual and emotional poverty at the wealthy West Knoxville schools. Okay? God is calling you to make disciples. I don't know what God's calling you to do specifically. I know generally God is calling all of you to make disciples. So find out where you can press in, where you can give your time, where it works, and obey the calling of God.
Say thank you so much to Clayton and to Joe.